Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Inlay Terms. We have none other than Mr. Tom Luongo back with us. Tom, how are you?
I'm good, Peyman. How are you doing?
I'm, trying to keep sane in an insane world. I'm
Yeah.
following, what's going down in the U.S. with you guys, and I don't know, what's your mental state at? Like, my anxiety is through the roof.
No, I'm actually I sleep like a baby. To be honest with you. I think Trump is rolling these people every day. It's subtle, but he's winning. And they keep trying to, by they, I mean Davos / City of London. I'm going to, like, my pattern does not change here because nothing about my pattern should change because it, it just seems to be predictive, and if it's not predictive, then I'll change the pattern. But as of right now, I mean, he won in Minnesota, okay, and he won in Minnesota by saying, look, you're going to enforce the law. Tim Walz, your political career is done, and if you want to stay out of jail, you're going to comply with Tom Homan's request. You're going to give us all the bad guys that you currently have. He's going to take all the low-hanging fruit out of Minneapolis. They rolled up and exposed the entire network of people, at a law enforcement level. So they got everybody's phones. They let everybody know they were up on their Signal chats, like the whole 9 yards. And then all the money came out, and then all the money flow came out. So they got a massive RICO case running. They then moved immediately to taking over Pacific Palisades. Why? The rebuild of Pacific Palisades, because Gavin Newsom's been doing nothing about it. So Trump takes that over, which is 35 miles from the port of Long Beach, which is also strategically important. Like I did a show with Tommy Kerrigan a couple of weeks ago. We got with a guy by the name of Mike Ariza, who used to run all the who's a veteran of running oil refineries all over California, so he knows the industry back and forth. And it's really obvious that Gavin Newsom and the California political machine out there is doing everything they can to destroy California, to prep it for an invasion by the Chinese and give it over to the Chinese. And so there's all that worry about this, and that's why they're shutting down. They're trying to make all of the oil refineries unprofitable, so that the companies all leave and shut them down. And it's why they're trying to put in unrealized capital gains tax or everything else that they're doing. It's literally just to drive all the successful people out, drive the military industrial complex out, right, and collapse the state so that they can turn it into a failed state, and then start the quote unquote start the invasion. And that's nice and that's cute, and that's going to last all of about another 3 months. Trump going at Pacific Palisades is your tell that he's not leaving California to rot, because this is all matters of national security. If you shut down all the oil refineries in California, you can't refine JP4, you can't refine jet fuel or diesel fuel or propane or anything else. You don't have an economy in California. You also don't have energy distribution from California back to Nevada and down to Arizona. So do you really think that Trump, who's staking so much of America's comeback on rebuilding hot, dry Taiwan down outside of Phoenix, that he's going to allow the pipeline to dry up and not deliver any fuel to Phoenix? Because that's what I learned when I was talking to this guy, Mike, was that, Phoenix is supplied by California. I didn't know this. I'm like, I just assumed it came from Texas or somewhere else. And no, like the refineries and all the offshore oil rigs in California are all, supplying a lot of the stuff east of California up to the Rockies, and then down south to Arizona. So we're sending, they sent the Border Patrol, the Customs and Border Patrol guys, the Greg Bombino and that crew. They pulled them out of Minneapolis, brought Tom Homan in, and then moved those guys out to start, doing workplace raids down in Arizona. Now Washington thinks they're going to be in full revolt. That's going to last all of about an hour and a half. So everybody's like making their counter moves, and it's cute and all. And I mean, I'm not saying it's not dangerous, clearly they're an open insurrection. Clearly they're getting their orders from, Davos/City of London, the old European colonial oligarchs. And clearly they have a tremendous network of money and people and all of this stuff out there and running around. But it's being bled off, I think, bit by bit by bit. And, the way you avoid an open civil war here in the U.S. and the way you avoid World War III is you bleed off all of the armies that were built to fight these particular battles, right? And this is what we've done. It's what he's done over in the Middle East by allowing Israel and Iran to beat the crap out of each other, right? And that's why he's putting more pressure on Iran now, because he's trying to get rid of what's the last vestiges of the axis of resistance, i.e. the IRGC. He went after Venezuela, taking care of Maduro and taking Maduro out of the chain of command. Puts complete pressure on the foundation on which Maduro was the figurehead, right? So that's the organized crime, that's the drugs and the money and the human trafficking and all that stuff, and all that cash that was flowing through that system. That's what funded Hezbollah, the IRGC, and all the rest of it. So, and Cuba, like the minute Maduro was pulled out, and Dexter White and I were talking about each other, like Cuba's next. Cuba's going to fall in 90 days because he's blockading all the oil going into Cuba, and they can't. The country can't function the way it is now without Venezuela. And at the same time, I think that the other, the bigger, from a geopolitical picture, like Venezuela was really important because it not only told the Chinese, oh, by the way, you're going to pay market price for your heavy sour oil that you need to run your blue water navy that you're building. Oh, and by the way, you're not going to get that from Iran on the cheap anymore either. We're going to bring them back into the market, and you're not to actually pay market price, because the Chinese were paying half market price for this stuff, and they were building a strategic petroleum reserve full of the number 5 and number 6 bunker fuel that they need to run a literal blue water navy, right? So this whole idea of the Don Roe doctrine or the Monroe doctrine being rebuilt here in the United States is real. And you're finding out just how quickly the United States, and just how powerful the United States is when it decides it wants to defend itself, as opposed to running around like the British catamites and around Central Asia and bleeding all of our money and vitality dry, which is what we were doing for years under Obama and the Bushes and everything else. Like an America that decides it's going to defend its economic, cultural, military, and strategic assets. How are you going to stop us? And all this propaganda about the potency of the Russians and the potency of the Iranians and everything else, it's all nonsense. Like, no, we're not going to take over Iran. No, we can't turn Iran into a parking lot without using nuclear weapons. But why would we want to? That was always the thing that never made any sense to me. Like, everybody, the minute Trump would say, look, I don't like what Iran is doing, well, you're not going to be able to take it over. I'm like, yeah, and how about the IRGC stops funding Hezbollah, and that stops funding, Yemen and all the rest of this stuff? We all know what, and worse than that, we all know who's actually behind all that. And this is the funny part about it. It's not Iran. Half of Iran is run by the British. The other half is run by the damn French. And the whole thing is just, and the Brits are on the other side in Israel, right? Balfour Declaration, all that happy nonsense. So it's literally just Alex Craner's, red ant, black ant jar, shake it up and watch them all explode. And then we're all supposed to be morally outraged by it, and we have to go into like police the whole thing. I'm like, how about no? And you stop your narcissistic triangulation between, all these groups that, don't have to fight each other. And we're just supposed to sit here and believe that, these fights are eternal and they're 3,000 years old and all this other nonsense. None of it's true. Most of these conflicts are less than 100 years old. I mean, at best, at the level and the way they've been, promulgated, the way they've been presented to us today. It's mostly just British and old, and when the Americans were on board with all this, the British and the Americans were involved. I mean, they were in cahoots, and now we're saying no, and we're getting out of it. We're saying
So
we're
I want to come back to that, Tom.
yeah,
I want to get eventually to the you call it Davos high table, whatever.
right.
I want to. How far back does this conspiracy go? I want. Does this go? Is there
I
a
hate to use
common
the word
thread
conspiracy. I hate
between?
to use the
Well,
word conspiracy just because that's a CIA word. That's an MI6 word. It's not conspiracy. It's just it's literally out in the open. These people tell you
sorry,
exactly what they're doing.
that's not what I meant. Like, is there
Yeah, I
a
know.
common theme from 2008, Obamacare, what happened during COVID, and what's happening with the
Sure.
fraud in Minnesota, and the nationalization of the mortgages, essentially
Mhm.
nationalization of student loan? Like, is there? I think you called it the wiping out of the middle class. Like, what's the common
Absolutely.
theme there?
The common theme is that in order to destroy, in order to bring the United States or to strip mine it, you had to the first they built us up after World War II, right? Or during World War II, they built us up because all the money fled Europe in the 1920s, right? And sovereign debt crisis, German hyperinflation, all this stuff. All the money flowed into here. The U.S. banks built up. We built the British. That all that European money came in here, built up the American industrial might to fight the World War II that they created with Churchill's nonsense vis-a-vis Germany and the Treaty of Versailles and everything else. And that's a 45-minute conversation that at this point. Well, let's just paint Churchill as the villain because he was. Okay. We go in and we fight World War II. Europe is bombed to hell and back again. We bombed the Japanese back to the Stone Age, sadly. And then we, embark on the Marshall Plan and all this other nonsense. And the more I write about this, the more I think about it, the more it's really obvious that we didn't win World War II. The British won World War II because they got to re-implement their old system and literally take their old system of debt colonialization and wealth extraction through central banks and fiat currency and all this currency arbitrage, and they created an entire institutional set at Bretton Woods. Our globalists and and that wing of the American oligarchy went along with it. It wasn't like we were like victims here. I'm not painting America as a victim here. Okay. But that special relationship we all talk about, yeah, that was birthed at Bretton Woods. All of those institutions were designed to do exactly what they did, which was to hollow out the middle class of the United States. But it was such a massive advantage, right, that it took 80 years to literally destroy the United States. That's how big it was. And you think about Bretton Woods, you think about how they pegged the dollar to the pre-war gold price, even though everybody had printed money to high heavens to fight World War II. Gold probably in 1946 should have been pegged to $200 an ounce, not 35. Same trick, by the way, that Churchill pulled after World War I, repegging the British pound back to the pre-war price after they spent themselves into debtor's prison to fight World War I, and they extracted all that gold out of the Germans. That's why the Germans hyperinflated. Okay. What happened to us is we went from having over 20,000 tons of gold in our backing the dollar in 1945 to 8,000 by 1971. Like the minute, like the bribe to the American middle class is that, hey, you're going to be able to, we're going to build factories here to rebuild Europe, everything else. And then, what happened? All we did was spend our own savings to rebuild Europe. And all the money flowed to them because what happened then, they were allowed to put tariffs on all of to protect their industries, right? And we paid for it all. And because we were such a massive industrial powerhouse compared to everybody else, they could effectively run trade surpluses against us, recycle those trade surpluses as not just U.S. treasuries to build the Eurodollar system, which then eventually grew and by the mid-1950s was bigger than the domestic dollar markets. So now it's in charge of our monetary policy. And then second, they were shipping all over. They were recycling all of their trade surplus in gold. So they were doing both. They were not just buying treasuries; they were buying all our gold. Eventually, Nixon had to stop the bleeding. His reward for that, by the way, was impeachment, was being run out of power. And then the Eurodollar system took over, and then the real inflation happened, and that's the real hollowing out of the middle class. And then we get to 2008. That was supposed to be the final straw, right? They nationalized the mortgage industry by getting rid of Fannie, by putting Fannie and Freddie in conservatorship. 3 years later, we get Obamacare and destroys the healthcare system. We go to the zero bound, turning the Fed into just another Eurodollar, printer go burr, right? And they paper over, and we just wind up with a 15-year stagflationary depression that culminates in COVID. And then COVID was supposed to lock everybody down, destroy the national transportation grid, move us all into 15-minute ecologies, and and implement Minority Report with more Germans. This has been my story for how many years now, right? And the Americans said in 2016 said no, that's enough, and we elected Donald Trump. And then they had had to spend 4 years binding Trump down. They had to go for COVID. I don't think they wanted to do COVID until about 2025, but Trump forced their hand and accelerated the timeline. And now Trump is just running. Trump is has come in with a very specific agenda and a very specific order of operations, knowing full well that all of the institutions domestically are against him. The DOJ, Congress, the Senate, the judiciary at the federal district level, like almost all of the federal district courts, all of the blue state governors, all of these, the mayors of these blue cities, all of this stuff. It's all the DAs, all of it. It's all been shot through with so much corruption and so much, for lack of a better term, treason, right? But how do you fix that? I think, I started thinking about this in terms of we already lost the country, as opposed to going, oh my God, if we lose the midterms, we're going to lose the country. That's the way a lot of people are running around, oh my God, lighting their hair on fire. I'm like, no, we lost the country. We lost it in 2020. We're fighting to get it back. Victor Davis Hanson had I watched a great thing with Victor Davis Hanson recently. And he said, yes, this is not this is not a revolution that's happening. The revolution already happened. The Marxists already won. They got us to, start to castrate our children and, all of the stuff that they did during the Biden junta. Now it's a counter revolution to get the country back. And if you think in those terms, so far, Trump's been pretty damn successful. And his walking into Davos the other day and basically saying, we don't care if you hate us. We know you hate us. You've always hated us. And he just keeps poking the snake to let them know. Like, think about the scenario. Think about this. What Trump does, he always does, is, and he's been doing this his entire life. I've been watching Donald Trump since I'm 9 years old. Remember, I grew up in New York. Okay. Like I've lived my entire life with Donald Trump, like somewhere in the New York on pages of the New York Post and the Daily News, right? But he's always been able to just go out and then, you know what? I'm going to poke that right there and see what the reaction is. And then we're going to watch the reaction. And that's going to tell me something. So Canadians, 51st state. Oh my God, how can you think that about us? And then they go like, oh, so really you always hated us. Really? You always hated us. Not the Western Canadians, right? Who are all, they were all Americans who moved into Alberta and Saskatchewan, right? No. We're talking about, the Torontonians and the Laurentian elites and everybody else, all the people who fled after the revolution, right? After Washington won, and, they all left the Northeast, the Tories, and they moved up to Canada and became what you guys know as the Laurentian elites, and settled in Ottawa and went into permanent opposition, backed by the British government. Why we have the War of 1812, why this, why that, all of that stuff, right? Think about it. That's what Trump is really good at. Oh, by the way, I know you guys hate us. Here's how much you hate us. 51st state. Governor Carney, right? Same thing with, it's what he does to, it's what he did to Zelensky. It's what he did to it's what he does to everybody. We want the Panama Canal back. It's what he did to Europe. Greenland. What's the first thing they did when he said, I want to acquire Greenland? He said acquire. He didn't say invade. What's the first thing they did? Oh my God, he wants to invade Greenland at the end of NATO, and we're going to put up a trade blockade, and we're going to do this. I'm like, excuse me. I thought we were all members of NATO and that we were supposed to be defending each other against the potential threats of the Russians and the Chinese. Well, doesn't it make sense to put Greenland under the control strategically of the most powerful country in NATO to defend Greenland and all of Europe from the Russians and the Chinese? Oh, really? So that's not what this is about at all, then. NATO was never about being a defensive organization. It was always an aggressive organization designed for you guys to get yourselves into fights you can't finish and have the American military come in and clean up, clean everything up. You guys wrote checks that the American military had to go cash. How about fuck you? No. We want strategic areas on Greenland, and we want access to the mineral rights and everything else. Oh, and by the way, Denmark's still going to pay for the administration of the territory because it's still theirs. Same thing with Maduro, and same thing with Venezuela. Same thing with he's just done this over and over and over again.
Tom,
and that doesn't mean that we're out of the woods or anything. What it means is that they're going to strike back really hard at some point. And,
I want to get to that, but first, you mentioned something. You said pretty much all the institutions are captured. You mentioned the DOJ, Intel, all that. What do you think Trump administration's move is? I think they recognize they made a fatal mistake in the first administration. How do you what's going to happen? Military tribunals, a federal only Supreme Court? Like, how are they going to clean the swamp?
It's a good question. What I would say is the following: he has to go through all of the civilian. He has to go through this like step by step with this in the civilian institutions. So you have to, right? Because we're not, as a people, we're not comfortable yet with saying nope, military tribunals, even though we could, right? No. That's politically not. We're not there yet. So he's going to go through the process. Like, again, watch what he did in Minnesota. All right. Minnesota was clearly an open revolt. Clearly, you could have invoked the Insurrection Act, rolled the friggin' military in, cleaned everything up, arrested Tim Walz, arrested Jacob Fry, arrested the lieutenant governor, yada yada yada. You could have done all that. Would that have been to his advantage? With a certain group of people, yes. But at the same time, those that hate Trump, those that have been gaslit by these morons at MI6, right, and the DNC and our media, and it's all the same thing. When I use the term MI6, I mean the CIA, I mean the Mossad, I mean all those things, because it all stems from those freaking people. Okay, it always has. The CIA was always MI6 from the moment it was built. It was MI6, right? So, rogue elements of the CIA are the ones that are loyal to the United States, is the way I like to look at it, right? I don't call them rogue elements of the CIA. They're the ones that are working with MI6. No, the rogue ones are the ones that are actually, like me, they're patriots, right? And so we have to understand that the standard operating scenario with the CIA is that. And so Ratcliffe has his own set of problems that he has to fix the CIA, whether he will or he won't, is up in the air. Same thing with Tulsi Gabbard at the NI, right? Trying to fix all the intelligence agencies, trying to figure out where all the worst people are and deal with them. So, but what did he do? He went in, he said, okay, I clearly could have done all this, but it would have only made him into exactly who, 20% of the population thinks he is, which is a tyrant and Orange Hitler and all the whole, the whole thing, right? And you never fight on ground prepared by your enemy. They prepared that ground on purpose. They were hoping the ice would shoot somebody. Never forget that. So at some point, you have to let events play themselves out and then come in and go, look, this is all very regrettable. This could all have been avoided. Look at the messaging afterwards. We're not having this problem with ICE in all of the cities that are complying. We're just getting rid of the criminals and we're getting rid of the bad people, and there's no violence and there's anything else. Why are you people doing this? Why are you against this? Oh. And then you leak out and you drip out through multiple sources, and you do it, and strategically you do it through citizen sources, citizen journalists like Data Republican and Nick Shirley and all these people, I don't think they were handed all that information. What am I, 12? Like, seriously, right? Obviously, they were handed that stuff because it's going to play better if it looks like it came from the same, came from normal people. The same way that we always find this stuff out about, Trump from this, from this random person, right? That, either raped it, was raped by him or this, it's the same thing. So, hey, why don't we just use citizen journalists to show everybody just how corrupt everyone is, right? And, that gives you a layer of plausible deniability. It also means you don't have to go to the corrupt judiciary if you're the FBI and go and get a warrant that they may not even issue to you. You just act on the information by handing it to the citizen journalist with a microphone and a GoPro, right? Ask a couple of questions, watch them all freak out, and, and so now you're just building the case in the court of public opinion of what needs to be done. That way, when it gets to the point where it's out of control, right, the American people are going to tell him, no, you have our blessing to use whatever means is necessary. And he doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to use any means necessary. Yeah, he can stop it tomorrow. But then you're destroying the civilian institutions, right, of the country. You're destroying the very nature of a constitutional republic. And you're saying, okay, yeah, it's a dictatorship now. And no one wants to go there. It's a very, very fine line. This color revolution stuff is a very, very insidious and dangerous thing. The British have been doing it for 300 years. They're masters at it. But Trump's not acting on his own here. He's not by himself. He's got Putin, who has unbelievable levels of experience dealing with this exact shit in places like Chechnya and Georgia and Belarus and this one and Ukraine and all of it. And he's been successful in some areas and not successful in others. But if you look at the way Putin has dealt with the color revolutions in the past, Armenia is a perfect example of how he's definitely dealt with a country that was taken over by Soros. His puppet was put in charge, Nikol Pashinyan. And yet, since then, Armenia really can't betray the Russians. Pashinyan keeps trying over and over and over again. And over and over and over again, Putin very carefully outmaneuvers him legally. And Armenia is still unsettled. We have a globalist puppet in charge, but the country hasn't been completely abandoned and handed over basically to Azerbaijan and Turkey. Okay. So, and it's a very complicated story there. And I'm not going to go into the details, and I would probably get half of them wrong because I'd have to go back and refresh my memory on all of them. But I've watched it since Pashinyan came to power, and I've been watching it, happen. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's that. And it has a lot of parallels to what we've seen in Minnesota. So how did Trump get out of Minnesota? Only 2 people dead. Could have been a lot worse. They wanted a full-fledged civil war. Could have had a new Minneapolis version of the Chaz set up, right? They tried taking over 4-block area. They tried all of these things. And eventually Trump was like, yeah, that's nice. Get the MPD out there and start cleaning this stuff up. So, that's I think the operative scenario. And I think he would rather go there as a means of last resort, because what do we want? We want America as a political institution, and we want to prove to the people who are trying to destroy it that our political institutions are strong enough, and our society is strong enough, and the Constitution is strong enough that we can survive even this from you.
Tom, one final question before leaving Minneapolis. Sure. I want to move to California.
Sure.
What about the timing of the 3 posts by the former president? I don't know what happened to your super big.
Yeah, this is Windows 11 and its inability to deal with my camera, and it's really freaking annoying. It keeps wanting to change. No, it literally keeps wanting to change the focus because it decided, oh no, you moved. You have to do this now. I'm like, oh, what's wrong with you people? I'm seriously, I'm at the point now where I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like it's terrible. But I deal with it all the time. I'm very sorry. But so
it's okay. We'll shrink you in post. The question was, Yeah, the three former presidents with their posts, Obama, Clinton, and well, whoever's whoever's in control of Biden. What do you think? Why did they make that post?
Oh, because they were all trying to, it's time to rise up in revolution against the demon Trump, and it failed. And because they're all like, we have the grand juries convening in Florida about Russiagate. You've got Bill and Hillary are now in contempt of Congress for ignoring a congressional subpoena. Like, the walls are closing in around them, slowly but surely. It is happening, and what are we going to do? Like, they're making their move. It's actually I think, as always, I think these are signs of weakness. When you have to pull Obama off the sidelines to write a letter at the same time, because they thought that I'm sure they thought that when that guy Preddy was shot, and they had like the smoking gun, that it was a bad shoot and all this, and then they released their presidential statements, and then to come to realize that, oh no, they've got hours of videotape of this guy, spitting on ICE agents and kicking their cars and everything else. Like, this guy was a ticking time bomb waiting to happen, and he's out there with a SIG P320, which is a comically unsafe gun. Comically, I mean, I'm a gun guy. I've for years I used to make fun of. We used to, we would get it. We sit around with gun guys and it's like, yeah, the one thing I'm never going to buy is an old Japanese 7.7 millimeter, their officer's gun, because you can literally press on the side of the gun and make the gun go off. Like, comically unsafe gun. And the SIG P320 is just as bad, if not worse. And and from that perspective, so you're like, oh my God, really? Yeah, he had one of those. Did he actually buy that himself, or did somebody give that to him so that we can get an accidental discharge and set him up to die? That I'm not saying that's what happened, but I can see that being something that happened, honestly. So excuse me.
Oh, no, that's fine. Yeah, I get the same sense. Like, the three presidents, they crashed and burned. Like, it was an epic failure on their part.
Yeah. That's what I thought, and that tells me that they're in serious trouble. And I'm happy to believe that, and I think that that's actually accurate. So yeah.
No, I'm glad to hear that. Moving to California, you mentioned how they want to destroy the economy, so China moves in. I'm hearing this thing about how China controls Canada, and then on the other hand, you have Carney that was parachuted in by the City of London. How do those two fit together? I use the term the high table. Does China control the high table? Does China have a seat now at the high table, or are they just an instrument of the high table?
No, I think the Chinese absolutely have a seat at the high table, and I think that the problem is that looking at China as a monolith, I think, is a bad idea. I found it really interesting, and that Minnesota was wrapped up, and all of this information came out that definitively tied Waltz and Fry and the lieutenant governor and everything else to the protests, and then was all getting tied directly back to British Columbia and to Vancouver. And then at the same time, there was a military coup attempt against Xi Jinping by the old Hu Jintao faction of the CCP. And Hu Jintao, who was he? He was the guy that City of London and Davos were prepping to. He was the guy who, effectively Xi deposed, right? And remember, their goal originally was build up China, move all their money in there, and then take it over, and then destroy the United States. And that's why we had 2008, why we had Obama, all of that stuff, right? All the stuff we just talked about. Now think about that in terms of they were going to move City of London to Beijing. And so out of nowhere, Hu Jintao's, faction makes a big move to try and overthrow Xi last weekend, or at least that's what we've been told. Okay. A week before that, Mark Carney goes to China to negotiate with Xi. And then that's a week before Davos. And then Trump goes to Davos. Carney tries to stand up to him because he thinks he's got China in his back pocket, because they're thinking, we're going to overthrow Xi, we're going to put our guys back in charge, and then it's going to be Trump versus our guys in China, and Canada gets to be the battleground. And that thing failed. And then all of a sudden, 48 hours later, Minnesota's done. Mark Carney saying, "No, we're not going to, make a trade deal with the Chinese." So damn right you're not. Because, we'll just cut off the Canadian economy and we'll kill it with fire. And there's Scott Besson going, "It's really dumb to pick a fight with somebody who's whose economy is 10 times larger than yours and is your biggest trading partner. We can crush you like a bug tomorrow. No offense to the Canadians. We actually want to liberate you." As if I'm speaking on behalf of Americans who are going to fight this war, if I'm a, lieutenant or lieutenant colonel and so on, we're here to liberate Canadians from these evil people that are trying to destroy Canada and have gone scorched earth on y'all. That's our goal. We want to be liberated or not. You're on whatever terms you want, but let's liberate Canada. Let's get it. Let's end this destructive nonsense of your political leadership and your financial class and your oligarchy in Canada, which is all loyal to the crown. Let's get rid of those people. It's no different than us overthrowing the oligarchs that sold us out to Davos for the 60 years. For 70 years or so after World War II, that got us involved in Korea, that got us involved in Vietnam, that took us off, that allowed our national savings to be squandered. All of it, destroying our reputation as the shining house on the hill to lift the world out of colonial poverty. All of that, we've just so much of the United States of cachet has been destroyed in service of these freaking people. We have a lot of so we have a lot of work that we have to do to prove to people that we're not doing this for typical what the typical shitbag Marxists would say are imperial impulses. That's not what Trump is doing. He's not cutting trade deals to turn people into vassals and slaves. He's trying to turn them into partners. If you look at every one of the deals that he's cut, even with Australia, he's been trying to cut deals that make them partners in the growth and the extraction of, and the development of, either in new coal mines or uranium mines or whatever. In Australia, same thing. A portion of the money will absolutely stay there. Everybody's going to grow. We're going to put some money in. We're going to get paid. You're going to do the work. You're going to get paid. You know what I mean? That's his model for Venezuela. Think about what he said. What they said for Venezuela. We're going to rebuild the Venezuelan oil industry, which is in a complete shambles right now, and then everybody's going to get a cut. The Venezuelan people are going to get a cut. America's going to get a cut, and we'll be able to sell, and the Chinese will be able to buy a certain percentage of it. Everybody wins. Everybody gets what they want. These are win-wins. No different than his board of peace for Gaza to do an end run around the sclerotic and anti-American and anti-civilizational United Nations. All of these World War II institutions are all anti-civilizational, folks. They're all dressed up in all the flowery language of equality, egalitarianism, and democracy and everything else. They're just friggin' Marxist anti-civilizational organizations run by psychopaths. And we should just stop pretending that they're anything but that. And that's where I am. So, hey, Canada, ready? Come on. You don't need to be the 51st state, but let's bring you into the United States. Let's get you real American military, especially Alberta.
Tom, let me throw two topics your way then. The first one is, have you noticed this massive increase of Trump derangement syndrome amongst the right-wing podcasters, specifically the boomers? And second, what do you think is going to happen to Canada now?
Oh, okay. The right-wing podcasters are all reverting to type. They were never really on board with Trump. They were always Pied Pipers. I'm talking now about the Steve Bannons and company. They always worked for the groups that just wanted to go with the Chinese. When I watch all that stuff happen, I'm like, I never trusted any of these people in the first place. When I saw that Steve Bannon was trying to get Trump in the same room with Jeffrey Epstein for a photo op, basically in 2019, or 2018 or whatever the hell it was, I'm like, really, Steve? Did you not know that Trump was the guy that turned Epstein in originally to Alex Acosta in Florida? Wow. Whoever your handler is, I hate to even bring this up, but I'm willing to actually say this because, well, it's me. Like, really, your handler at MI6 really did you one dirty, like that they didn't actually inform you of the situation with Trump, or did they not even know, right? So, the whole Bannon wing of the Republican podcast space makes perfect sense to me that they're all being activated because they're either all, I don't know, like they just could be seeing that their grift is ending and that the best grift for them is to turn against Trump because that's going to keep, that's because being pro-Trump doesn't bring in as much money. Could be that they're compromised. Could be that they were never who they were in the first place. Like Candace Owens has always been City of London. Like that's something new. The guy I can't figure out sometimes is Tucker Carlson. But like Dave Smith, who cares about that guy? Comic Dave Smith is a freaking oxymoron. Guy's not even funny. Like I'm funnier than he is, and I'm just an old angry white guy from Florida. But whatever. No, sorry, Dave. It is what it is. I watched that, and I've been watching that effectively crash out for a while now. I've been expecting this to happen. The Judge Napolitanos, all the hardcore libertarians, all those guys, they were always revolutionaries. They were always indistinguishable at a metatextual level, at a philosophical level, not at a policy level, but as a philosophical level, as an intellectual level. They were no different than Marxists. Permanent revolutionaries. I've come down to almost people who self-identify the leaders of the old leaders of the libertarian movement, again, like the Judge Napolitanos, the Daniel McAdams, they're all Trotskyites, every one of them, because Trotsky believed in permanent revolution. Nothing is ever good enough. They're constantly purity spiraling into ever smaller and smaller groups. The only difference between them and Trotsky is that as of right now, they're not willing to kill anybody to implement their ideas. No, they're libertarians. They're just gonna wet the bed until they're completely irrelevant and everybody stops listening to them. While they all get together and huddle around the campfire, going, "Why doesn't anybody listen to us?" Maybe because you're fucking morons. Like I don't know. Maybe because you're not capable of actually building anything. So, yeah, even though your ideas are somewhat good, but not in this context. In this context, we're fighting a war against non-state actors, and hate to say it, but at this point, that's why we create states to fight non-state actors. The same people who will tell you that letters of marque and reprisal were used against the Barbary pirates, back in the 1800s, are the same people that can't understand why we're going after Maduro and the shadow oil fleet with all these oil tankers that are riding 6 feet higher above the waterline than they normally would when they were full of oil. So maybe there's not any freaking oil in them. Yeah. Like how about piracy is returned to the high seas in the form of oil tankers? So there's that. That was the first question. What was the second one? Because I got lost in my.
What the hell's going to happen? What's going to happen to Canada? I think Mark Carney's just shit the bed. We have no economy. I don't think Americans want us because they're so liberal.
No, that's not true. We absolutely want Alberta. We absolutely want Saskatchewan. You've got the Athabasca Basin up in that Saskatchewan, so we're happy to bring Saskatchewan into the fold. Absolutely happy to take Alberta and British Columbia because of all the gold, silver, and everything else that are in the Canadian Rockies, and access to the coast to keep the Chinese from having a foothold on the North American continent. Eastern Canada is a bigger problem. It's the same problem that we have with the northeastern United States, but eventually that'll play itself out. Like the minute y'all can't in the East. Can't loot Alberta and Saskatchewan for money anymore. does Ottawa even matter? And again, at the end of the day, if it's not like, again, no one wants to do this, but we joke about it. We joke about it down here. Like, what would it really take to take over Ottawa? A couple A-10 Warthogs and, a tank platoon or two. Like, the guys don't even have an Air Force to speak of. Like, you know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, you don't have any, the Canada as a thing doesn't have any cards to play. Carney was brought in to triangulate and try and, and try and slow down the process and be a thorn in Trump's side. Again, what Canada has always been, a thorn in the American side. Like, I hate to break it to Canadians, but you guys were born, were created. The country was created to stop the United States from taking over all of North America. We all forget, why did, the Russians sold Alaska to the United States in 1867, right? That's a fact. No one asks why the Russians, sold Alaska to the United States for nothing, for practically nothing. It's because they didn't want it to fall into the hands of the British. They didn't want the British, through Canada, owning Alaska. So they effectively gave it to us. And then Putin comes out the other day. It was hilarious. He's like, does the math. Well, if we sold Alaska to the United States in 1867 for that, in inflation-adjusted terms, that means Greenland is worth about this. And it was like some ridiculously low number, like $227 million, something like that. I'm like, oh, like there's very little humor on the planet that is drier than Russian humor. I was like, oh, that's a golf club right there. That was hilarious. But that's the reality, I think, of a lot of this stuff. And we have to remind ourselves, why did they lose their minds over Greenland? It's because they always understood that Greenland is of strategic importance if they were going to, if they were thinking long term and to have to go to war with the United States. Remember, they were talking about dumping all their treasury bonds, having to go to war with the United States. They were floating all these things in the Atlantic, the Financial Times, the Times of London, all these insane things. And now, Canada? No, Canada's going to be carved up piecemeal and then absorbed. That's what's going to happen if Trump is successful. So if the civil war in the United States does not happen, as it's drawn up over on the Gantt chart at Evil Corp Central over at Davos, right? And then eventually Canada will be absorbed into the United States. It'll start with Western Canada, Alberta, then Saskatchewan. British Columbia will not be able to survive because the minute that Alberta and Saskatchewan put up a tariff wall for goods traveling east and west, forget it. Like, there's no way the Chinese can supply Eastern Canada with anything. Y'all will not going to get. Where are you going to get the energy from to run your economy?
This country is a mess. I find it funny that this plan was hatched in Europe. I just say the king. And they recognize that their leadership in Europe is so subservient to Donald Trump that they can't rely on them. So they sent this guy like thousands of miles away to their colony in Canada to basically set up the beachhead here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's what they did. And Trump gave them all the ammunition necessary to drive Canadian liberals crazy. And I'm sure that there was a fair amount of, election fraud and electioneering. It was clearly electioneering, like Pierre Poilievre, like running 67 candidates against Pierre Poilievre and all that stuff, which was, if you're going to game the system, well, that's how you game the system. But it's just, it's all kind of pathetic. Because at the end of the day, they have to be banking on the fact that they have enough traitors inside the United States to be able to stop Trump. That was the plan. And so far, Congress has done some of that. And they're trying desperately to get to the midterms and do whatever they think they're going to do. And I'm telling you, I would not be surprised if John Thune never forces Congress, forces the Senate to vote on the SAVE Act, which is in the United States, that would be basically national voter ID, right? Among other things. Same day voting, no mail-in, no mail-in, only mail-in ballots from, back to basically the way we used to run our elections, when our elections were accurate to about 0.5%, right? They're not accurate to 0.5% anymore. The elections that don't matter, they're accurate to 0.5%, like a normal, which for just basic human error, right? I've always thought that elections are about that accurate. But in the important ones, they're not anywhere close to that. They're putting their thumb on the scale 10, 12, 15%, right? To move these elections and to get the outcomes that they want. If we don't have that, that doesn't happen. That's when Trump goes to the military. We never canceled elections during the Civil War in the United States. Never canceled a congressional election, Senate elections. Never done it. Never defaulted on our debt. Never canceled an election. I can see both of those things necessary. If Davos goes for the, they go for the full burn it to the ground mode, right? Activate everybody. And that's why I think again, these, 30 days ago, I said the next 90 days are going to be really interesting. They're going to be really important. And now at the point where I'm like, we've already done so much more in these first 30 days since then. So I was thinking about this like right around Christmas last, Yeah. The next 60 days are going to be really interesting. We're going to find out just how advanced, their thinking is and where they are in their order of operations. He's going to have to start putting them people in jail. I know that. He's going to have to start doing something, and but he has to break Congress. If you've got a judiciary that refuses to operate, then we'll move to universal code of military justice. But that will be as a last resort. Because again, you want to get out of this with the civil institutions, the public institutions being capable of handling most of the problem. You don't want to have to go to the military unless you absolutely have to.
No, I hear what you're saying, Tom. We're almost, I don't know how much time you have, but we're almost at the 1 hour mark. You said on several of your episodes, you mentioned like it's a 3-step process. First, they have to go after, I think you called it the public money, which is USAID, which they've done. Second, they have to go after the private money, which is, cartels, which they use indirectly. And then they'll get to the point where they have to dig into their own pockets to fund all of these color change things. Where are we right now? Where are they getting their money?
I think that they're still, so Congress refused to defund National Endowment for Democracy, which is nearly as bad as USAID. So that's clearly telling you that the Congress is still in opposition mode, right? 81 Republicans, I think, was sided with the Democrats to keep National Endowment for Democracy running, which is like literally treasonous behavior at this point, right? What I'd say is putting that kind of arm twisting pressure on Congress, and I think about it, would be a statement that they're trying to avoid putting their own money on the table. So, because it's not like we've killed off all of the drug money or all the human trafficking money or any of that stuff, but we've killed a lot of it, right? Have starved the beast in a lot of ways. And Scott Besson is taking them to the woodshed in gold, in silver, knowing full well that those markets are, where they can't, where you can, they use the profits off those markets to, monetize and pull yield off of the savings that they've stolen over the years. Like they don't actually ever deliver the physical silver, but they make money manipulating the price of physical silver, right? Same thing with manipulating the price of physical gold. So, hold on. So, no, just go away. So I'd say that we're probably on the cusp of them having to put their own money on the table, because if you break their backs on the gold and silver market and force them to deliver at current prices, they're going to go bankrupt, because silver's moved so far so fast. Gold is, in this month, has moved so far so fast. Now I'm saying this, and the markets this morning, both markets are breaking this morning, right? Gold opened this morning, I think about 5,500. The last I checked, it was trading at around 51. So, has it fallen backwards? It's vacillating. We might have actually gotten to a moment, to the end of this bull market right now. I don't know, but it's Friday. So, no, is it? Yeah. No, it's Thursday. Sorry. It's been a hell of a week. I can't even remember what freaking day it is anymore. There's a lot going on here. So it's a good question. I don't have a really good answer for it, but all I can do is throw you signs, right, as to what I'm looking at to see what the state of the game is. And remember, this will all sound like I'm gish galloping all over the place. And I'm watching 17 different markets at the same time, trying to find the clue, right, as to where we are. We got the Japanese are normalizing interest rates. We had the Fed refuse to cut yesterday. Is that going to force the ECB and the Bank of England to cut, given the situation? I don't know. Was that the right move by Powell? I don't think so. I think he should have cut rates. But, I don't know. It's a very, very fluid situation. And I think the best thing I read yesterday was from my friend Vince Lanci. He said, lots of things are happening and no one has any answers right now. The people who know what's going on are the people in the know actually trading the markets, and everybody else is just speculating. And we should stop speculating and effectively, in this moment in time, watch price. But he was talking specifically about gold and silver because that's his focus. But I do believe that in some ways that's actually the best advice for all of this. Where the players stand. Okay. At this point, if you still think Trump is working for the globalists, there ain't nothing I can do for you except say, really, you need therapy and possibly some SSRIs. And I would never say that to any person that I didn't, despise, because SSRIs are evil. I mean that sincerely. That's between you and your therapist. Sorry, stop telling everybody what your daddy issues are on freaking Twitter every day. You know where Trump is. You know where his team is. You know where Davos is. You know where the crown is. Everything else is a mess. And then everybody else is a middle player. And that means Canada, Israel, Iran, Venezuela. These are all middle players. The Dutch, right? These people are, you know what I mean? They're not the center of the story. I saw this morning, the Dutch are putting on a 36% annual unrealized capital gains tax on all financial assets. I'm like, oh, well, that's the end of the Netherlands. Oh, that's okay. Not going there anytime soon. Maybe before I die, I'll want to buy some Dutch property because it'll be 12 cents on the dollar. And, hand half of Amsterdam to my daughter and go, I picked this up for $50. You know what I mean? Here you go. Because, a tax policy like that is destructive at a level I use the phrase all the time, it's anti-civilizational. And so clearly they're not backing down there. Keir Starmer just went to China to try and smooth Xi, and Xi basically told him it's time to bury the hatchet. You lost, Keir. You lost. Your boys are all in jail. Ain't nothing you can do about it. But Starmer, is trying to salvage that now. He's like, She's going to be look right at him and go, no, Trump and I are going to roll you in flour. And I'm going to leave the rest of that joke on the cutting room floor.
Tom, final question. What do you think's going to happen? What do you think their next move is going to be? Because Minneapolis didn't work. Are they going to do another Minneapolis, a terrorist strike? What do you think?
I think we're beyond false flag. I was watching some stuff with my friends, like Blaine Holt and the Ian Burlingame and Steve Murray and others. They were on Tommy Kerrigan's podcast the other day, and they were talking. I think they're right that I think we're beyond the possibility of a false flag because everybody can see it coming. So now it's a matter of can they rally the troops enough and then touch off enough chaos to, do what they think they can do. I'll be shocked if they actually pull that off. I think they're going to try, and maybe it's going to be Virginia, maybe it'll be Michigan, maybe it'll be Oregon and Washington. It's clear that they want to hand the left coast to the Chinese, and they're making that offer. It's clear. That's clear what they're trying to do here. So I bet you dollars to dog shit that that's part of what Starmer was offering Xi. And she's like, if I want California, I'll just take it. But Trump will bomb Beijing back to the Stone Age if that happens. Do you think Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth would stand for the Chinese moving into California any more than they already are? Like, no. Like, nobody wants to watch the United States go scorched earth. Like, Britain will go scorched earth financially because that's the only lever they have, right? Trump and Besson both told everybody last week at Davos they don't have any cards. They don't have any tools to play. If any cards that they try to dump on the table to hurt us, we will counter. Or did you not watch gold go to $5,500 an ounce last night? Or silver to 120, or oil back towards 70. Brent crude, that is, right? Like, they're in control of the situation. You've got the Bank of Japan. This is why I'm dead serious when I say Bank of Japan is normalizing monetary policy and defending the yen to break the yen carry trade. What happens this year, and I'll leave you guys with this because I'm going to be, I also schedule the bald ones with Tommy Kerrigan and Dave Collum and Jim Kunstler, and I told them I'm going to be late because I'm doing this show with you guys. And Dave Collum was like, great, we got a half an hour to like crap all over you. We'll do our best to turn you into the world's biggest, interspecies erotica purveyor. But that being said, I'll leave you with this, which is that Japan is normalizing monetary policy. And by the end of the year, the Bank of Japan and the Federal Reserve will be within 25 or maybe 50 basis points of each other. You have to destroy the yen carry trade. You have to get rid of it. Because the yen carry trade was the secondary means by which Davos and London had control of the short end of our yield curve. SOFR is in control of the short end of the yield curve now in the United States, right? Domestic markets. But with the potential for the yen carry trade to continue, you can always get access to cheap dollars through Japan. Now it's this, who's going to replace Japan? Certainly not the Swiss, even though they're trying. The Swiss are probably going to go negative to save the Bundesbank. That's already happening. So if Japan's no longer on board, watch the snap elections in Japan next week or 2 weeks from now very carefully, or a week and a half very carefully. And the United States cuts rates by another 100 basis points, and Japan raises by 100 basis points. So, we'll be at 2.5 or 2.7, 2. Yeah, we'll cut probably under Trump. We'll cut 150 under Trump's next term, next Fed chair, down to 2.25. You don't think that the Bank of Japan can't be at 1.75 or 2%? What yen carry trade is there now in order to get cheap dollars? In order to get overly cheap dollars? No, you have to use your own money at that point. And now and then it's a different world. And then once the yen carry trade is off the board, and Fannie and Freddie are back in the market to control the long end, to support the long end of the U.S. yield curve, right? And the United States will have declared financial independence, and then they don't have any. And gold is $7,000 an ounce, and we're looking at a Federal Reserve with a leverage ratio of total balance sheet to the gold reserves of like 3-1. Bank of England is infinite. They have no gold. They have no tangible assets. And they've lost the LBMA. And they've lost Canada. They've lost the Canadian banks, the money laundering operation, and a profit center to take all the profits out of gold and silver mining, which is what the Canadian banks have been doing for years. And the Democratic Party will be bankrupt, so the Canadian banks are going to lose like half of their business. Because what do you think all the money is flowing through the Canadian banks? Still coming from USAID, getting laundered through the Canadian banks. The DNC and the Canadian banks are, if Julian Assange is correct, they're like completely, so that's what comes next. I think we should probably leave it there, let people like draw some conclusions from there. I'll keep thinking about it. But that's the lay of the land as I see it right now.
It's a nice light topic to end on. Everyone's busting out the Econ 101 books. Tom, I know you got to go, so where can people follow you?
Sure, you can follow me over at tomluongo.me, which is where the blog is, which is where the podcast gets posted all the time. You can follow me on Twitter at TFL1728. And you can support us at Patreon/Gold Goats and Guns. We just put out the January newsletter literally about 20 minutes before I hopped on this call. And that one was a hoot. That one was fun to put together. So,
well, Tom, I just wanted to thank you very much for coming on. I know you're a hot commodity and you're busy in these trying times, so I really appreciate it. Thank you.
No, absolutely, Peyman. I always enjoy talking to you, and anything I can do to raise the spirits of my my captured Canadian brethren.
Yeah, send the Marines.
I may give you guys a lot of crap, and I may call it flappy headland and everything else, but I only say that out of love. I want to love Canada. I want to go back. I want to be able to go to the Hockey Hall of Fame. I want to be able to catch playoff games up there and all the rest of it. Like, get some of my favorite things in the world came from Canada. What am I going to do? Complain?
Call Pete Hegseth. Get him to send Delta Force to Ottawa. Here.
I don't think we actually need anybody as well trained as Delta Force. I think to take Canada. I think we can do it with a lot less than that. But
send a couple of sheriffs. All right. Let's end it there.
We'll send Grady Judd up from Florida. He'll take care of it. All right. Take care, man. Enjoy.
Thanks, Tom.